Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Sarva Mangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadhike Sharanye Trambake Gauri Narayani Namostute. In our life, we all have different needs that need to be met. We have physical needs for shelter and food and clothing, but we also have emotional needs. And the biggest and most basic emotional need that everyone shares, that we all share as human beings, is for love. Now, love comes in many forms. We know as children the love of parents, and as parents we know the love for children. We know the love of siblings, of friends, of family. We know the love for teachers. We know the love for a guru. But the most supreme love is love which is directed towards the very highest ideal. And that ideal is God. Now, it's easy to love someone when you can see them and you can talk to them and you can understand them through your conversation. But how do you develop love for an ideal which seems beyond reach, which is so subtle that it can't always be grasped clearly by us? What is recommended is that we spend time in the company of those who love God. And when we do so, we ourselves come to develop that same love that they have for the Lord in our own heart. One great example of a devotee whose life, story, and some teachings are given in this most beautiful book that is now being launched is the figure of Janabai. Janabai was someone who lived in Maharashtra in the 13th century. And even though not much is known about her life, there are different accounts that describe how she came to be a devotee of Lord Viṭhṭhala, of Lord Krishna. Now, when Janabai was very young, she visited the town of Pandharpur with her parents. And as she arrived at the mandir there, and she saw Lord Viṭhṭhala standing with his hands on his hips alongside Rukmini Devi, she decided that she would not leave. She was so enchanted by this form of Bhagwan that she wanted to spend the rest of her life in as close proximity to him as she could have. By another account, when Janabai was very young, her father had a dream. And in that dream, he received a message to take her to Pandharpur so that she could live there in service to a particular family. Now, whichever way it happened, what we do know is that Janabai ended up in Pandharpur at a young age. And when she was there, she too received the blessing of satsang, because the family that she entered into service to was the family of none other than Sant Namadev. She began to serve his family and she stayed with them in their home. And as we hear about her life and how she grew up with them, we come to see this most unique relationship that she had with Bhagwan Shri Krishna as Lord Viṭhṭhala. There is a beautiful incident that is narrated where Bhagwan comes from the mandir to have dinner with Namdev and his family. Now, Bhagwan is welcomed into the home, all the food is served, and everybody is sitting down to enjoy this most delicious offering that has been prepared. Janabai, as a servant, was not at that time seated with them to take this meal. And so she's watching from the sidelines as Bhagwan enjoys his food with Namdev and Namdev's family. Now Janabai is feeling extremely sad that Bhagwan would forget her and would enjoy his meal without thinking to ensure that she too is fed. And as soon as this thought of sorrow arises in Janabai's mind, Bhagwan, of course, immediately becomes aware of it. And what he does is he quietly sets aside his food. That food that was set aside, Janabai takes and she covers it and she keeps it. And everybody goes, once the meal is concluded, to rest for the night. Now in the middle of the night, Bhagwan wakes up suffering from pangs of hunger because he ate only half of what he was prepared to eat. And in order to satisfy his hunger, he goes looking for that plate of food that he was earlier enjoying. That plate of food is now with Janabai. So she, realizing that Bhagwan is awake, takes that food and with all love, she offers it to him. Bhagwan takes that same plate of food which earlier he had set aside, but now when offered back to him by Janabai, he lovingly accepts and relishes that very same food. In another incident, there was a terrible storm that took place in the town. And the storm was so terrible that the very roof of the house in which they were staying was blown away. Now, as the roof was blown away, of course, this has not just happened in one house, it's happened in lots of houses. And so everybody is very busy rushing around trying to repair the damage that's been done. And Bhagwan is so loving and compassionate that he himself rushes out of the mandir to help his devotees to repair their property and their homes. So he comes to the house of Namdev and he himself climbs up and starts repairing the roof of the house. In all this work, he gets so tired that he then falls asleep as soon as everything's done. And when he wakes up, he's running late for prayers. Like many of us, he rushes. And in that rush, he happens to leave behind his upper garment. Now, this garment gets left behind in the room or in the place where Janabai is staying. Bhagwan rushes back to the mandir, and instead of having taken his cloth, he's taken an old blanket and he's wrapped it around himself. He arrives back in the mandir and he takes his place. And as soon as all the devotees start coming into the mandir again, they see that Lord Viṭhṭhala is not wearing his usual cloth. He's wearing a blanket and it looks very mismatched. Doesn't look like what he was wearing yesterday. So now there's a big commotion. What has happened to Bhagwan's blanket? Maybe somebody's stolen it. How can it be found? And in all of this, somehow that cloth of Bhagwan's is found in Janabai's house. Now what happens is nobody thinks maybe he himself left it there. Their thought is she's stolen it. And so she's immediately pulled from there and they're getting ready to punish her. And the punishment was for there to be some physical hurt, physical harm done to her body. Now Bhagwan saw that because of my mistake, my devotee is being punished. I'm the one who left my cloth behind, and now she is going to be beaten because they think that she's stolen this cloth. And what's said to happen is, just as Janabai is about to be struck, that stick turns to water and it falls back into the river, which flows by the mandir. And everyone has the opportunity to recognize what a great devotee Janabai is, that Bhagwan himself makes it impossible for her to be hurt and for her to be punished. There are many such fascinating incidents in Janabai's life. And what's more beautiful is that what is still available for us today to learn from are her teachings. Many compositions are there. And through these different compositions, what we come to recognize and what we come to see is the beauty of the devotee's relationship with God. Now, how do we relate to God? We can relate to God as a mother, we can relate to God as a father, it could be as a friend, it could be as a guide, it could be even as a child. What we see in Janabai's compositions is that she didn't just feel one way towards Bhagwan. There are so many different bhavanas so many different ways of feeling that she manifested through her compositions towards the Lord. And what is even more touching is that we have the opportunity to see how Bhagwan himself sees Janabai as his child and rushes out of the mandir to help her and to take care of her. There is a very beautiful composition which says, Jana goes to collect water, and behind her rushes Hrishikesha, Krishna. He makes sure that her hands and feet don't get wet. He fills the pot with water. He spreads the cow dung on the floor. He completes all the chores. Janabai gave herself so completely to Lord Krishna, to Viṭhṭhala, that he made sure whatever she had to accomplish, he accomplished for her. When we read the Bhagavad Gita and we hear what Sri Krishna has to say, which is that for those who think of him single-pointedly, he takes care of everything. He takes care of their yoga and kshema. We hear this or we read it, and yet we feel in our life that even though Bhagwan may be protecting us, we feel that he's protecting us in an abstract way, or he's providing for us in an abstract way. And it's not really tangible in our lives. What the lives of these devotees make us see is that Bhagwan provides for us in a way that is so obvious if we are to open our eyes and recognize how he is giving us everything that we need. There is another beautiful composition which gives great courage and solace to all devotees. Because one of the things that very often holds us back is our thought of our own wrongdoings or our own littleness. When we look at ourselves honestly and we see the negativities within our own personality, we very often wonder, how is it that Bhagwan will accept me? Janabai beautifully points out that Bhagwan can no less reject a devotee than the sea or the ocean can reject the rivers which flow into it. There is no need for us to worry about our worthiness in front of Bhagwan, because he sees us as his own and he loves us as his own. The scriptures tell us that the self is the seat of supreme love. And it's explained to us that we love ourselves the most because our self, our true self, is of the nature of happiness. It's of the nature of bliss. And therefore, everything that we love, whether it's a person or an object or an experience, everything that we love in life, we love because it gives us joy. And once it stops giving us joy, then our love for that thing also ceases. Our Puja Gurudev defines love as identification with the beloved. And what we see is that in order for love to be understood by us as identification with the beloved, then we have to understand that love can truly be accomplished when we ourselves have recognized our own true nature. If I see myself to be of the nature of bliss, then I also recognize all others to be nothing but a reflection of that very same blissful self. And recognizing myself and all others as such, then alone can there be true identification with the self and with all others. As long as we remain limited, our capacity to love also remains limited, because some selfishness is retained. What Janabai demonstrates to us is that we can achieve that state of supreme love when we direct all of our love towards God. Because by loving Lord Viṭhṭhala, her realization and the experience that she came to is that her beloved Lord Viṭhṭhala is everything. Not only does he appear as all relationships, but he is everything. In fact, she comes to say, I eat of the Lord and I drink of the Lord. In other words, Bhagavan alone appears as this entire creation. And that Bhagavan is of the nature of bliss, which is my very own nature. Janabai's life and her compositions have the power, if we are to look into them with a heart that is open to love and open to God, they have the power to really transform us and our relationships with the Lord. Through reading about her life, and through reading her compositions, really what comes across is that love is a path which has no boundaries. Love is a path on which there are no entrance barriers. Nobody gets checked as to whether they're suitable or not to enter on this path. All that's required is, with whichever feelings we come, whichever thoughts we come, if we're ready to surrender them to the Lord, that surrender, that capacity to dedicate, is what will lead us closer to Him. She reassures us that no matter who we are or where we are all fit and we are all capable to love God. And once we develop love for God, Bhagavan himself makes this promise that he will give us what it is that we need. Not only will he give us what we need, but he himself leads us to the ultimate liberation. Through Janabai's life, we come to see the truth of this. And I hope that we all can be inspired by her and all the other devotees, so that our love for God becomes true and pure and leads us to the highest, in the same way that they also achieved that very highest goal of life. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.